I guess, do they really matter? Still a lot of time trying to convince growers that these are an issue. I guess they're hidden in the soil because they're below ground and their impacts can be confused with other things. But if we look at the data here, so we're looking at two varieties. The blue bar is Strzelecki and the red bar is a variety called EGA Wiley. So in 2010, if we grew both those varieties at Mungandai, we basically got 2 tonne lower yield in Strzelecki versus EGA Wiley. Whereas if we did the same thing at Glargenbone in 2010, it went the other way. The actual Strzelecki out-yielded the Wiley by 2.2 tonnes. And this is the importance of knowing which actual species of root lesion nematode you have in your soil. We deliberately picked the Mungandai site because we knew it had a very high population of Praelinchus thornii. Had over 15,000 Praelinchus thornii in that topsoil, whereas it had no Praelinchus neglectus. Strzelecki is actually very intolerant to Praelinchus thornii, whereas Wiley's tolerant to moderately tolerant. Hence we got that 2 tonne yield difference. However, we went to Glargenbone. We deliberately picked that site because it had no Praelinchus thornii, but had a high population, over 12,000 Praelinchus neglectus in the top 30 centimetres. Now actually Strzelecki is one of the better varieties you can put in for Praelinchus neglectus. It's actually moderately tolerant to moderately intolerant, whereas Wiley is intolerant to neglectus, so therefore the yield went the other way. So knowing which variety you actually have is critically important as to what you do. And as you can see, they have a big impact on your profitability when you've got high numbers there. I guess if you're still not convinced that they're an issue in your cropping soils, this is actually some 2011 National Variety Trial data. So NVT system is wheat variety trials funded by GRDC across central northern New South Wales and throughout Australia. And what we can do, we've done the same thing. We've gone and pulled the 2011 NVT data, looked at Strzelecki versus EGA Wiley. So you can see here when you go to sites Coolah, Canamble, Ballara, North Star, you got significant yield loss. So 24% lower yield at Coolah in Strzelecki versus Wiley. What we actually had is a range of stripe rust trials on the edge of these NVT trials in 2011, and we actually caught it to 0 to 30 centimetres for nematodes at sowing for those other trials. So we knew what our background levels of nematodes were. And as you can see, it actually lines up with what was there. So Coolah had over 4,000 Praelinchus thornii on the topsoil, out to North Star, which had just over that threshold of 2,000. We're getting that 10 to 8% yield loss there by putting an intolerant variety, Strzelecki, in. Then go to sites Gilgandra, Trangie, Ningen, where basically there's very little difference between both Strzelecki and Wiley. They're jumping around a bit. And when you look at your nematode numbers that are at those sites, basically didn't have either nematode at both Gilgandra or Trangie, and a very low population of Praelinchus neglectus at Ningen, so you don't see that separation. However, when you went to Wongarbin, it actually went the other way. We had Strzelecki out-yielding Wiley by 11%. And when you look at what was actually in the soil there, we had quite a high population, over 3,000 of Praelinchus neglectus. So remembering that Strzelecki is moderately tolerant to moderately intolerant to Praelinchus neglectus, hence it out-yielded the EGA Wiley by 11%, which is intolerant. So I guess the key thing then is we had sites where we didn't do coring, so Walgett, Taloona, Bladder and Merriwa in 2011, and same thing when you compare the Strzelecki to the Wiley. At Walgett, minus 12% in the Strzelecki, minus 18 at Taloona and minus 35 at Bladder. Even though we didn't core it, you probably suspect that there was decent levels of Praelinchus thornii there. Whereas Merriwa went the other way. Again, the Strzelecki out-yielded the Wiley by 15%, so you can probably suspect that Praelinchus neglectus might have been at play there. So certainly, do root lesion nematodes really matter? Well, I certainly hope so, because they're reflected in all your national variety trial rankings. And personally, I don't have an issue with that, because that's really representing, when you put the survey data there that we looked at earlier, it's putting that in perspective. These things are naturally out there anyway in random paddocks. NVTs are randomly put into good rotations, and they will be challenged by root lesion nematodes in some districts, so your varieties reflect what is affecting yields in those areas. I guess it doesn't matter how many you've actually got in your soil. So how we looked at this in 2011, we actually had a chickpea national variety trial in 2010 out at Cumberchance, out near Walgett there. And we went in May after the trial had just been sown, and we caught it for nematodes. It was a shallow coring in this situation. We actually found it was sitting right on that threshold, just over 2,000 Praelinchus thornii were at that chickpea site. So what we then did is let the NVT site go through, and we went back the next year and individually caught every single plot in the chickpea NVT trial. And what we found then is we'd actually established populations within plots that range between 2,292 up to over 39,000 with individual plots. So what do you do as a researcher? You basically then divide that trial up, and we say 102 plots to a moderately tolerant variety E.G.A. Gregory and 102 plots to the intolerant variety Strzelecki to see what these starting populations impact they'd have on yield. So firstly here we've got the starting population of Pathologist thornii along the bottom within each of the plots, and then the yield outcome in 2011. So certainly you see there's a statistical trend as our starting populations went up. This is in the moderately tolerant variety E.G.A. Gregory, our yield went down. So we are actually still getting yield loss in a moderately tolerant variety. Hence, that's why it's rated moderately tolerant. However, if you put an intolerant variety, Strzelecki, in that same situation, you automatically see that bar jumps down from a moderately tolerant to an intolerant, and you've actually got a 35% yield loss across all those starting populations. But the same trend in an intolerant, the higher that starting population, a statistical trend that you're going to get less yield. So certainly has a big impact there. I guess the interesting thing is we didn't have any of the plots actually had populations below that 2,000 threshold. So we're quite interested to know what actually happens back in this range here. So in a moderately tolerant variety, does it flatten out this way? But there certainly seems to be a bit of a trend here in the intolerant with these lines as we approach 2,000 jumping up. So it's interesting to know how quickly it drops off. So is it a cliff face? So once your population reaches 2,000, you've got that 35% yield loss, or is there some sort of flattening off in this area? Is something we still need to establish. And I guess the other one is, if we truly had a fully tolerant variety, we should get a flat yield, higher yield across all those starting populations.